Killers who hid behind trusted professions. Case number 1, Hans Schmidt, priest. On the morning of September the 5th, 1913, a sanitation worker in New York City pulled a burlap sack out of the Hudson River. Inside were human remains, a torso, wrapped carefully, deliberately. Over the following days, more pieces were recovered from the water. Police identified the victim as Anna Aumüller, a 21-year-old housekeeper from Austria. The investigation led them to a rectory in Upper Manhattan, to a Catholic priest. Father Hans Schmidt was born in Bavaria in 1881 and ordained in Germany in 1906, a process he partly accomplished by forging his own academic credentials. He had fabricated a doctorate, had official university seals made, and presented the document to his bishop as genuine. It worked. From the very beginning, the man's existence was built on performance. His early assignments in Germany ended badly. He was transferred repeatedly for misconduct, affairs with women, abuse of children in his care, behavior that alarmed colleagues, but was consistently absorbed and quietly managed by a church that preferred to move problems rather than confront them. In 1909, German courts found him legally insane and he was formally defrocked. Somehow, he made his way to the United States and was accepted into the Archdiocese of New York, where no one had been informed of his history. In New York, Schmidt met Anna Aumüller when she came to work at his parish. He began an affair with her, and in a ceremony he conducted himself in secret, declared them married. A ceremony with no legal standing and no witness. When Anna became pregnant, Schmidt understood that exposure was imminent. His hidden life, the affair, the fake marriage, the defrocking in Germany that the American church didn't know about, would collapse. On the night of September 2nd, 1913, he cut her throat. Then he dismembered her body with surgical precision, wrapped the parts in burlap, and distributed them into the river at different locations on different nights. When detectives arrived at the rectory, Schmidt confessed almost immediately. His fellow priest stood and watched as he was led away in handcuffs. At his first trial, he pleaded insanity, producing a hung jury. At his second, he was convicted of first-degree murder. He was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison on February 18, 1916. Hans Schmidt remains the only Catholic priest ever executed for murder in the United States. What made him possible was not exceptional cunning, it was institutional failure. A church that moved him instead of stopping him. A diocese that accepted him without checking. A system that treated the collar as a character reference. Case number 2, Karl Denke, church volunteer and community figure. In the small Silesian town of Münsterberg, today the Polish city of Ziembice, there was a man that everyone trusted. He carried the cross at Lutheran funerals. He played the organ at Sunday services. He was known for feeding the homeless off the street, offering them shelter, a warm meal, a few coins. Neighbours called him Papa Denke. They had no reason to call him anything else. Karl Denke was born in 1860 into a farming family in Prussia. His childhood was unremarkable except for one detail. He was described repeatedly as deeply difficult to raise. He ran away from home at 12. He drifted. After his father died, he inherited a small sum, bought property in Münsterberg, and settled into a quiet life as a local merchant, selling leather goods and notably boneless meat at the weekly market in Breslau, the regional capital. He had been killing people since at least 1903. Denke's victims were the people he publicly championed: homeless travellers, vagrants, journeymen passing through town. He would invite them in with the promise of food or money for a simple task. Once inside, he bludgeoned or strangled them. Then he worked methodically, dismembering the bodies, separating flesh from bone, rendering the remains into products. Human fat became lard. Skin became leather belts and suspenders. The meat, investigators and contemporaries strongly suspected, was sold at the Breslau market. He kept a ledger. 30 entries, each recording the date, the victim's name, their age, and what he called their slaughter weight. He had been doing this for 21 years. Nobody suspected him because nobody could conceive of suspecting him. He was the man who fed the poor. He carried the cross at their funerals. When homeless people arrived in Münsterberg, locals directed them to Denke's door. He was the community's designated act of charity. That reputation was not accidental. It was the mechanism of his crimes. Every act of public generosity was also the sourcing of a future victim. What ended it was survival. On December the 21st, 1924, Denke lured a vagrant named Vincenz Olivier into his apartment, offering him 20 pfennigs to help write a letter. When Olivier turned his head, Denke raised a pickaxe. Olivier ducked, took a deep gash to the temple, wrestled the weapon free, and ran into the street screaming. Neighbors heard him. Police were called. Officers arrived and arrested Denke, who calmly claimed Olivier had tried to rob him. The police believed him. They arrested Olivier for vagrancy, a crime in Germany at the time, and sentenced him to 2 weeks in jail. Denke was placed in a holding cell for questioning, still not formally a suspect. That night, he hanged himself with a pocket handkerchief before the interrogation ever took place. It was only when police entered his apartment on Christmas Eve to secure his belongings that the full picture emerged. Jars of pickled human flesh, over 400 extracted teeth, hundreds of bones. The leather goods he sold, made from skin. The ledger on his desk with 30 names. The 31st entry, Olivier's name, already written in with a blank where the slaughter weight would have gone. Denke's case carries a particular horror that goes beyond the crimes themselves. He killed for 21 years without generating a single official suspicion, not because he was invisible, but because he was beloved. The community's trust in him was so absolute that even the man who escaped with a wound to the head was jailed while Denke was released. The institution here was not a hospital or a church. It was reputation itself. The social identity of the generous man, the devout man, the man who helped the poor. That identity was his protection, and he had built it deliberately, over decades, for exactly that purpose. Case number 3. Genene Jones, nurse. Between 1981 and 1982, something strange was happening in the pediatric intensive care unit at the Medical Center Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. Children were going into sudden cardiac arrest. Children who had arrived stable were dying or coming close to it. And there was a pattern, a clustering of these emergencies on the shifts worked by one particular nurse. Her name was Genene Jones. Jones had wanted to be a nurse since childhood and qualified in 1977. By the early 1980s, she was working the pediatric ICU at Medical Center Hospital in San Antonio, and she was, by many accounts, extraordinary at her job. She was attentive to the point of obsession. She lobbied to care for the sickest children. She wept when patients deteriorated. Parents trusted her. Colleagues admired her dedication. What she was actually doing was injecting children with heparin, a blood thinner, and later succinylcholine, a muscle relaxant that induces paralysis and respiratory failure. She would induce a crisis, then work frantically to reverse it, positioning herself as the one who saved the child she had just tried to kill. On the occasions where she failed to reverse what she had started, the child died. Hospital administrators noticed the death rate anomaly on Jones's shifts as early as 1981. Their response was not to involve law enforcement. It was to restructure the unit in ways that distributed the risk and, ultimately, to allow Jones to resign quietly. She was given a neutral employment reference. Jones moved to a pediatric clinic in the small town of Kerrville, Texas, run by a newly qualified physician named Kathleen Holland. Within weeks, children seen at the clinic began experiencing unexpected medical emergencies. One of them, a 15-month-old girl named Chelsea McClellan, died. When investigators tested the clinic's supply of succinylcholine, they found vials that had been diluted, the drug drawn out and replaced with saline, the missing doses unaccounted for. Jones was arrested in 1983. During the investigation, prosecutors estimated she may have been responsible for as many as 46 deaths of children in her care, though securing convictions was complicated by the fact that Medical Center Hospital had, apparently deliberately, destroyed nursing records from the relevant period, rather than hand them over. She was convicted of murder and injury to a child and sentenced to 99 years. Due to a sentencing quirk in Texas law at the time, she became eligible for parole consideration and was released in 2018 after serving 30 years, over the loud objection of investigators and the families of her victims. In 2020, as part of a cold case reinvestigation, she was charged with additional murders from her time at Medical Center Hospital. The case is ongoing. What Jones understood, and exploited, was something fundamental about how hospitals work. Care is distributed across shifts. Records are managed by the institution. A nurse who creates a crisis and then responds to it with skill and apparent devotion is not a suspect. She is a hero. The performance of care was the cover for its opposite. 3 killers. A priest, a church volunteer, a nurse. Each operated in plain sight for years. Schmidt behind the collar, Denke behind 20 years of public charity, Jones behind a uniform and a reputation for caring more than anyone else on the ward. The pattern across all 3 cases is the same. The identity of the trustworthy person was not just cover, it was the weapon. It determined who got access, who was believed when they explained away suspicion, and who was protected by institutions more concerned with their own reputation than with the people in their care. In each case, someone noticed. In each case, the system chose not to act. That choice is what makes these cases more than just stories about individuals. Subscribe for a new video every week.